Thanks for staying with your view. With myself, Bongiwe Zwane is standing in for my colleague JJ Tabana. Now, as promised, we are in conversation right now with Dr. Mamphela Ramphele, who is the co-founder of Reimagine South Africa. And the conversation that we will be having tonight is based on a column that she has written about how freedom is a responsibility for all of us as South Africans. Now, Dr. Ramphele, thank you so much for talking to us this evening. Let's just begin here. You say that freedom requires a responsibility by all of us, and seemingly a lot of us, as you say, as South Africans, have dropped the ball since the election. How then do you suggest that we hold those in public office to account and not drop the ball, as you say?
Good evening, and good evening to your listeners. The reality we have 25 years after attaining our freedom is that freedom has yet to have meaning in the lives of the majority of ordinary South Africans. And that tells us that we have missed the opportunity to do what we committed to do in the preamble of our Constitution, which is to heal the wounds of divisions of the past and establish a social justice society that respects human rights and where everybody's talents are supported and promoted, so that we can build the prosperous democracy that so many people died fighting for. And the dropping of the ball is related to the fact that once we got our freedom, most of us, including government, forgot all about those commitments that we made in the preamble of our Constitution. And so the Constitution, as the fundamental law of the nation, doesn't have the foundation it requires, which would have helped us to establish a shared sense of values so that all of us as South Africans can unself-consciously identify ourselves first and foremost as South Africans, as citizens who have the rights and the responsibilities to make our constitutional democracy work for every South African.
Now, how do we do that, particularly as citizens? If you look at some of the people, a number of people are starting to feel like they're not part of, governance at all. If you look at, a community like a community in Hammanskraal that is still battling to get safe drinking water, how does then a community like that feel that it is part of a South Africa that is building towards a better country?
The first mistake we made, all of us, is in being starstruck by Madiba, we ascribed the attainment of our freedom to being liberated by the ANC, as if all of us were sleeping and waiting for the ANC that was in exile to come and liberate us. The reality of our history is that, particularly since the late 60s, after that lull when the political parties were banned and people were sent to jail and others went into exile, a small group of students started a consciousness movement that enabled people to overcome the fear that was gripping the country and stopped all of us from challenging the brutal apartheid system. But once you free yourself as an individual and as a group of individuals to say, I am human and therefore I deserve and demand dignity. I will not be called a non-something, which is what we were all called non-whites, non-Europeans, once you overcome that willingness, because you are afraid to accept humiliation, you're free. Now that freedom that permeated the country, that was behind the energy of high school students to defy Dr. No and have June 16, that energy that got the trade union movement, faith-based communities, and people in civil society to stand up and say, we will not allow governance that works without our consent, and instituted an ungovernability civil defiance movement, which in the end forced the apartheid government to negotiate with Mandela. So instead of Mandela liberating us, we liberated him. But what he did, which was absolutely brilliant, was to use the energy of citizens to be able to negotiate with his jailers. But when he came out, people forget what he said. He said this freedom was not won by one person or one organization. It was won by the efforts of each and every South African, and of course with the support of the international community. The point I'm making is this: once you discount your ability as a citizen to shape the future you want, you become a prisoner of the people whom you have given the mantle not to be public servants who serve you, but to be your rulers, as they call themselves, the ruling party. You are finished. And this is why we are where we are. We saw the state capture process unfolding, and it didn't start with Zuma. The state capture process started with the arms deal. Everyone knew there was no war. What was needed was to use the procurement of arms to fund the ANC. We knew that. And we still today are suffering the consequences of that. And it is through that process that the likes of Zuma, who never had been considered to be of value or worthy to be president, he became president because he pleaded victimhood. When the arms deal debacle became a public issue, and he was blamed for taking the smallest amount of money, and that's how we ended up where we are. But it's not just the ANC that's responsible. It is also, yeah.
But are we then not in trouble because from what even JJ was saying earlier on, that there appears to be, from civil servants, particularly in Parliament, that are voted in and also sent to Parliament by their political parties, a sense that they are accountable to the political party and not to the citizens?
Of course. It's not it appears, it is a fact. When he was Secretary General of the ANC, that your conscience doesn't count. What counts is your loyalty to the party. The fact is, proportional representation has been hijacked by political parties as a tool of control and command. It needs not be. And as we heard from one of the rulings of the Constitutional Court, it is not true that you can only go to Parliament if you are a member of a party. And I think all of us as South Africans suffer from the consequences of us having failed to do, again, what I said at the beginning, to educate ourselves, to be citizens who understand our rights, our responsibilities, and the prescripts of our Constitution. Our Constitution doesn't say only parties can govern. It talks about proportional representation to make sure that everyone has a chance of being represented. If you decide to stand as citizens of X place and or as a constituency of women or young people or workers and field candidates at the national, at the provincial, and at the local level, there's nothing stopping us doing that. We have, in the same way that we discounted our historic agency to shape our future, we have also become very lazy at reading and understanding what we can and can't do. We hear what people say about what we can or can't do. And of course, political leaders are not going to tell you that actually you don't need them. They're going to make you, as they've done over the last 25 years, believe that you can only vote for them because only the ANC can guarantee that the struggle for freedom that people fought for has meaning in everybody's life. It hasn't got meaning in 80% of South Africa's people. And we have made ourselves prisoners of political parties and of political leaders. And this is unnecessary. This is where I'm saying we, the people, must take responsibility for having failed to rise to the occasion. As international studies have shown, you get liberty not because somebody gives it to you, but by fighting for it. And once you've got it, you've got to sustain it for it to thrive by making sure you hold those who are in leadership positions, both in the government and in the private sector and in civil society, in the trade unions, accountable. And that's where we, the people, have failed.
Well, Dr. Ramphele, I'm going to ask us just to hold it there and go for a quick ad break. But when we come back, I want us to look at some of the moments where we as a country, and then we saw civil society gathering and coming together in order for them to be able to rally around a particular cause and what it will take for us to get back into that moment. Remember, you can join us on this conversation on Twitter. It's hashtag Newsroom405, and you can then, of course, tweet us as well at your view on Newsroom 405. We are still in conversation.